Hello and welcome to the Mobile Accessible Games interview series. I'm your host, Aaron Spelker. Mobile Accessible Games is a group that is dedicated to all things about mobile accessible gaming, and through our interview series, we interview game developers as well as accessibility influencers about the state of accessible gaming. And this week we have a game developer. We have Jordin Kee, the creator of Path of Adventure. Jordin, welcome to the interview series.
Thanks, Aaron. Thanks a lot.
So Jordin, I always like to just kind of kick off the meeting by having, the person I'm interviewing just tell us a little bit about yourself and, what got you into gaming.
Yeah, all right. So I'm Jordin Kee. I live in the Netherlands, which is like a small country around Amsterdam. And well, I'm mostly a software developer by my background is software development, and I like to create games in my spare time. And a few years ago, I created Path of Adventure. So that's like the biggest thing I've made, and it's live in on the app stores, Android and iOS, and yeah, that's about it.
So let's talk a little bit about Path of Adventure, which is a fun, great game to play. So why don't you tell people just a little bit about, what is Path of Adventure as a game? What type of game is it? What do you do in it? And then the follow-up question would be, why did you create that type of game? Of all the different types of games you create, why was it this one?
Right. So Path of Adventure is a text game, and it's a roguelike. I mean, there are people very you can use the term very freely, but I
Right.
just call it roguelike. So it's a game where you set out as an adventurer on a path, and you have to yeah, continue following the path, and you'll end up in all kinds of situations, and you have to fight monsters and get their loot and improve your character, so that you can defeat the end boss at the end of the path. And yeah, and the events that you'll find are randomly generated, and you'll hop into dungeons that are randomly generated, and so there's every time you play around, it's going to be different. So yeah, that's it mainly.
Yeah, I mean so even more detail on that. As you set on this adventure, you have to kind of go, 50, 50 steps forward, or 50 locations forward.
Exactly. Yeah.
If you make it to the end, to the 50, you fight the big boss. But along the way, at randomly at spot number 11, it might be a cave, and it says, "Do you want to go in this cave and explore it?" And you kind of have to decide. Well, I might want to explore that, and maybe I'll get some good loot that'll help me fight this end boss, or do I really want to go in there, maybe get hurt, and then not be able to make it to the end because I got myself too hurt. So you
Exactly.
don't.
Yeah. So, yeah. The game features permadeath, which is this typically a roguelike thing. Like if you die, that's the end of the show, and you have to go back to the start. And when you do it again, the whole path will be different again. So
Right.
you'll have new kind of challenges, new surprises, and stuff.
And the other kind of fun part about it too is the end boss, if you make it to slot number 50, is different. So you really
Uh-huh.
kind of want to pay attention to at the start, well, or early on when you find out what kind of monster you're finding. You don't find it right away, but early on you find out at the end of the path there's going to be a dragon or a troll or whatever the case may
Yeah.
be. And you need to have different stats to really beat one versus the other. Like you might want to put strength in if you're fighting one particular type of boss. If you're not fighting that boss, you might want to put it in a different statistic, speed.
Exactly.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
so that really makes it kind of important to make decisions on what your loot you're picking up and what you're trying to advance. One of the fun things I really like at the start of the game. So every time you start, you step foot on the path and you run into an adventurer who's basically given up, and they basically throw you all their gear and say, here you go, you go give it a try. And that's kind of randomly generated as well. And you can make a big difference on how far you progress if you get some good stuff right out of the gate. At the start of your path, it could really help you make it to the end.
Exactly. Yeah. So the entire game is really like you should be trying to make the best out of the situation. That's like the game in a nutshell. So it throws all kinds of stuff at you, and there's going to be big challenges, and there's going to be some gear which is random, and you as a player, you have to figure out, okay, what am I going to keep, what I'm going to take here. Yeah, as we say in Dutch, you have to roll with the pedals that you have.
Right.
and that's basically the game in a nutshell.
Yeah, and then you have some great replayability, not only the randomly generatedness of each path being different, so that adds replayability, but you can eventually select different types of characters that have different advantages or disadvantages as you go down the path as well. So it kind of gives
Yeah.
a unique twist to that challenge as well as you play it. So you had mentioned, I think you're kind of saying that your day job is in software development, your hobby is creating games on the side. So what is your pedigree in software development? I mean, did you go to university for game development or computer development in some sort of
Yeah, I
manner?
studied computer science,
Mhm.
which is like yeah, it's like university in Holland. Yeah, and basically I just work for software companies making websites, web applications. When I started my career, I had this, I was already making games in my spare time, and I had this idea of, am I going to chase the game development career, or am I just going to stick to software development? And the idea was that if I choose software development, I'm guaranteed for a good job, and it usually pays all right. So I can save up some money and do the game development in my own time.
Mhm.
I don't have to work under a boss or I don't know, a game designer who tells me what type of game I have to make. So the game development is really my hobby, my freedom. I get to make whatever I want. But the downside is, of course, that it takes ages before you really finish something because, yeah, game development takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
Even a small game, it took me years. So, yeah, when I decided to make a text game, that was mainly an sort of an experiment because I'd never done that before. And I started working on it and trying different things and getting the technical fundaments, getting that ready and stuff like that. So I think I worked on it for about 2 years before, yeah, it got
Is
to a
that like
stage.
every day for 2 years, or is it
Yeah,
a couple hours a
evening
week?
hours and weekends. I could work a little less, like 32 hours in a week. So I had like 1 or 2 days in a week that I could work on it. So I did that for a couple of years, and then at some point the game was at the stage that I thought, this is turning out pretty well. I could actually turn this into something cool, something really nice, but that just would take me a lot of time still. And by that time, I already sort of was fed up with my day job at the time, and so I saved some money and I quit and I went full time on Path of Adventure.
Nice.
That was basically my own adventure because I'd never done that before.
So now,
Um,
now you're doing 8 hours a day working on Path of Adventure for some period of time.
exactly, yeah, yeah. So that's what I did in 2018, and the first idea was to do it for 3 months and see how far I would go, and then I would, search for another job.
Mhm.
But after 3 months, there wasn't anything finished yet, so I added another 3 months and then another 3 months, and that's how it went. So I think after about 9 months, I released something on the Android store, Play Store, and then the ball got a little bit rolling. So people started to leave reviews and ratings, and then I thought, okay, this might actually turn out to be something. So I continued working on it, made an iOS port, published that, and I think all in all, I spent about 15 months or so on the game,
Mhm.
like full time. And then the money was out and there wasn't a lot coming in. And also my wife was pregnant. So I thought, okay, this is a good time
Yeah,
to go back to normal life and
sure.
find myself another job. So that's what I did.
Well, it sounds like, I mean, not many people get that opportunity to really kind of dedicate the full time to it. Most people I hear who are kind of indie developers, like you said, it's
Uh-huh.
nights and weekends. It's their second job, that sort
Yeah,
of thing.
yeah.
It's kind of
So
nice that
that's
you.
what I did, and then it was always a dream of me to try it at some point to do it full time. And basically, all you need is well, some money so you can live, you can buy your mortgage
Right.
and your food. And if you keep your expenses low, you don't really need all that much. And yeah, so that's what I did. I really cherished the time that I had to work on the game.
What program were you creating the game in?
So I looked around for engines like Unity, 3D, or Game Maker, or there are some other engines, tools that you can create
Mhm,
interactive fiction with, or text interpreter games.
mhm.
But they weren't a really good match for what I was trying to make. So in the end, I decided to use the tools that I know, which is web techniques. So basically, technically speaking, the game is a web application which runs in a wrapped package, which is called Apache Cordova, and that makes it, well, an app for a mobile store.
Okay.
So yeah, the web application is built in Angular, written in TypeScript, which is a very common technology for web applications.
So, was there any limitations in using that program of completing your vision? Like I just can't get the code to work, or I had to do a workaround. I wanted to do it this way, but I couldn't figure out how to write code
Right.
to make that work.
Well, you get in those challenges all the time, really. You make something and you bump into an obstacle you have to overcome. That's like second nature to a developer, I think.
Mhm.
But yeah, it was a good match for a text-based game, but it wouldn't be a really good match if you want something real-time graphics, visual, you know. So anything like which went a little bit more to the gamey side of things, like audio or animations, those things are tricky.
Mhm.
So in the end, I decided to skip audio altogether. I mean, it's possible technically, but it takes a little bit more work. And yeah, I had limited time, so I thought, all right, it's a text game, so I can skip that. But yeah, most things are yeah, they went pretty well, I think. Yeah, yeah. The main challenge I think for this game is the Cordova part, where you say, okay, this is a web application, and I'm now turning it into an app. That brings a lot of trouble,
Mhm.
especially if you wanna use certain functions on the phone, like in-app purchases, for example. That's a very tricky thing to do.
Um, do you still have to, maintain the game, or are there like Apple updates or Android updates that are making you have to go back and,
Yeah.
make alterations, or has it been pretty clean?
So it went smooth for a while. So I haven't been updating the game for a while. So that went okay. But now I'm getting emails from Google saying, okay, you have to update this, you have to update that. And I have to say, I'm a bit out. You know, it's
Right.
been more than 2 years since I've seen that code. So I really have to find myself some time yeah, to get back into it and do those updates. And so yeah, that's the maintain part. When you're closer after release, there is a lot of maintaining, like bugs coming in, people emailing you with, I've tried this and then this happened, and can you fix it? Also, some people make suggestions that I think, well, this is a really valid one, so let's build it. So yeah, especially right after release, you're doing a lot of that sort of stuff, and then at some point it's just there and it gets downloaded and does its thing. It's like magic.
Like that. Um, so, in creating Path of Adventure, you're doing this as a solo project, over there in Amsterdam or just outside of Amsterdam. It's kind of a one-man shop, but that's creating that game, right?
Mostly, yeah, yeah.
And then, what I think people don't appreciate, and you kind of alluded to it. I mean, you're spending 15 months or so on a pretty full-time basis working on this game. There's a lot that goes in to every little thing that you see on screen or any little thing that you interact with. Is there any more insight you could provide those, who play games, kind of what's really underneath the hood of, creating a game like Path of Adventure?
Uh-huh. Yeah, I think you're right there. There's a lot of work that goes into the process, and I think the hidden stuff is all the iterations that the game went through before it turned out to be the game that you play. So I've made like screenshots and notes for myself to see all the decisions I made and all the changes I made, just to not forget about all the other versions, let's say, of the game that went before the final version.
Right.
Especially with game design, it's something you cannot really predict. So you just have to. It's a bit trial and error. So you think about a game rule. You're like, okay, I want to do something with magic, and you build some stuff, and then you spend a lot of time building that, making buttons, making an interface, making weapons, and all that kind of stuff. And then you have it there in your game, and you let people play it, and very early it's clear that it doesn't work. It's a system that's broken, and you have to fix it again. And maybe after two or three of those tries, you just dump it all together, and you make something completely different. So
Well,
that's with game design. That's like yeah, there's a lot of time going in that process.
well, that's good to know. I had, fooled around before I lost my sight a few years ago. I was, for fun working on creating a game in Twine, which
Okay,
was
yeah, fine, yeah.
yeah. And what I found is I was like, oh, I have this great idea, and I would do it, and then I try to run it, and it'd be broken, and then I spent, probably, of trying to create any mechanic, I probably spent 75% of the time trying to backtrack to figure out why it was broken and trying to fix it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Uh, and then I learned very early on that maybe you want to spend more time up front thinking about all the different mechanics and things that you want to do so that you can build it right from the outset, as opposed to trying to squeeze it
Mhm.
in, and adjust all the other code that you've already written to, bring in this new mechanic that you thought, oh, this would be great if this was in there. So a lot of lot
Uh-huh.
of lot of upfront thinking. I think if I was able to ever do it again, yeah, I'd spend
Yeah,
way more time at the beginning thinking it all through.
yeah, that's true. But also the upfront thinking that there are limits to that, because it's very hard to imagine how a certain mechanic will work out. There
Right.
is too much, yeah, there's too much going on there, and a game has a certain feeling, it has a certain experience and emotion, and that's very hard to predict. So it's basically, you have an idea, you try it out, you change it a little bit, you try it again. There's a lot of playtesting in the process, of course. You have to have a lot of people willing to play all these iterations and give you valuable feedback. Be honest, if you go with friends and family, they always say, "Oh, this is a nice game." So you have to find some people that say, "All right, this is good, but this is rubbish," and
Did you
that.
find, like I found, I didn't get very far in the grand scheme of things of, my vision to what I had built. Um, but even as I got further and further in creating this game, to test the later things that I had created suddenly was so, um, time consuming. I imagine,
Yeah,
again, you want to check whether room 50, when you're fighting the big boss, works. I mean, you have to run through that game and get to 50. And then I got to probably run through it a gazillion different times because, well, it doesn't work when I bring this particular equipment or I've done these
exactly. Yeah,
things.
yeah.
So, did you actually have to play through all the time, or do you have some way to kind of,
Well,
run a simulation, if you will?
yeah, you can manipulate the code. Like you jump into room 20, right? From the set go, of course. You
Yeah.
can change those kind of things, or you can give yourself all these items and powers that you need to get to that point. But there's definitely a lot of playing. Like, what happens if I just play the game now? Especially if you change like values, like how often is this weapon dropped, or how often does this monster appear. Those are like very difficult values to validate whether they are the right value, right? Because
Yeah.
there's the randomization, and
Right.
you can play like 5 times and you think, oh yeah, this went okay, but if you look at your player base, it might be played tens of thousands of times, and then your 5 times isn't a really
Right.
proper way to
Representative.
validate.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the hard part. Yeah.
Yeah, I always think when I think about games like this, have random loot drops, or or you have
Mhm.
modifiers. If you get a certain statistic, and now you hit harder or faster or whatever the case may be. Keeping that all in balance so that you
That
don't
yeah,
make yourself either too powerful or you've done all this work and you don't really get anywhere. I mean, that balance seems to me, you know, so difficult to again conceptualize. I would imagine that needs a lot of tweaking, and you tweak this one, and then on its
break
own,
something else.
it's fine. But if
Exactly.
you
Yeah.
combine it with something else, now you're way too strong and things
Exactly.
like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I find that the math and the formulas behind the scenes fascinating to think. And then also you probably want to make sure that you build those in a way that it's easy to I want to change this number, but I don't want to change it in 50 different lines of code. You want it
Exactly. Yeah. 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 So you put those kinds of things in a different file, and then you can tweak them very easily.
right.
But finding the magic number, that's the hard part. Yeah. And then you also have to take into account that there are so many different types of players, right? You have the hardcore RPG player who knows all these things, and you probably know, okay, this is a good weapon, this is bad, and I'll just
Right.
have to sort of do this, and then I'll get there. And you have the people that have never played a game like this before, and you also want to have a good experience for those players, and that's also a very difficult thing to do. If you look at the reviews for Path of Adventure, there are people saying it's too easy, and there are people saying it's too hard.
Right.
So okay,
Yeah.
you haven't fixed that, right? But yeah, that's also another balance that you have to find.
And again, I mean, there is no like simulation. Like I've set all it up, just here, computer, run through this 1,000 times, and
Uh-huh.
it give me some statistics about how many times you actually beat the
Yeah,
boss.
I haven't done that, but I think that you could do it. You could do that, but you would never really know whether it was a good experience or not.
Yeah.
So
Well, yeah.
it would
There's
just be a statistic.
yeah. There's playable, and then there's actually, is this actually any fun to play?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I think the best thing is to have lots of people play it. So on Android and yeah, iOS as well, I have this beta program. So if you like the game, you can join the beta program, and you'll get like a notification when I make a new release. And then if you want to, you can download the new release. It's like a beta version, and you can play it, and you can leave comments on the new version.
Mhm.
And yeah, if there's just enough people to do that, then you get some valuable information.
Now, the people who will be watching this, who follow my group, which is Mobile Accessible Games, I found your
Hmm.
game looking for games that are playable for those who are blind and visually impaired, of which Path of Adventure is a very accessible game to do that. Um, did that just kind of happen by circumstance, or did you become aware that, oh, if I make some tweaks, I can make this accessible for people who are blind and visually impaired? How did accessibility, get into your game?
Hmm. Hmm. So from my web development background, I knew that accessibility, is a thing, and you can optimize a website so that it works well with screen reading software.
Mhm.
So I knew it was a thing, but I wasn't sure how it would work on mobile specifically. So I sort of parked the idea, like, okay, I have to investigate it at some point and make sure that the game is works for that kind of software. So then I got a review from a blind player who said, I played this game with Google Talkback, and it kind of worked,
Mhm.
and I had a good time, but it could use some improvement. So first I was amazed because there was already somebody, playing the game through this screen reading software, and I didn't realize that it was already a possibility. I thought I had to really switch that on or something.
Right.
And so I got in touch with that person, and he gave me a lot of feedback, and he invited me into a community of audio games, that forum of audio games. I'm not sure
Mhm.
if you know that one, but there's a lot of blind and visually impaired players on that forum, and this player just dropped a topic about Path of Adventure, and he basically said, people try it out, and developers listening, and what kind of feedback can you give us? And that worked really well. So the game uses icons for a lot of stats, and those icons weren't translated. So this player actually just played the game without hearing any stat. I'm not sure how he ever did that.
Yeah.
So that was one of the major improvements that I made, and from there the ball just got rolling, and I made all these kind of improvements, like in the structure of the choices and the menu and all those kind of things.
So it sounds like you had, as you said, some background that made you aware that accessibility was something that was out there and
Yeah.
could be applied. I mean, do you think that's, the biggest roadblock for other developers is they're just, unaware? They've just never encountered it or never had somebody reach out and talk about accessibility. Do you think that's why, such a small percentage of games actually have accessibility built into them?
Yeah, that's one of the reasons, I think. Yeah, definitely. Also, I think it's maybe developers want to save time, and they think it's too much of an effort for a little gain. I'm not sure.
Right.
But
I mean, how much effort would you say, like how much extra effort did you put in to add accessibility into the game?
Yeah, that's hard to say. Wow, I don't know, like 10% maybe of the time,
Okay.
something like that.
So
Uh,
significant, but not overwhelming.
no, exactly, yeah, but it takes a little bit of time to dive into that subject, I think. But I think the biggest struggle, at least for me, was that it's hard to test.
Mhm.
So first of all, I wasn't aware that even my own phone had this talkback functionality, which is like built in every Android or
Right,
iOS phone.
right, right.
I wasn't sure about that. I wasn't aware of that. So when I turned that on, I lost control over my phone like completely. I had to Google on how to switch it off again.
Right,
So that's another struggle. It's if you're not used to that, it's very hard to use, and it needs training. And even if you do that, if you practice with it, you'll never reach that same level of a blind or visually impaired
right,
user.
right.
I mean, I've seen videos of blind people using talkback or voiceover, and the speed is like
Yeah,
mind blowing. I
yeah,
mean, I can just follow it, and also the entire structuring of things is you have to be experienced with using that kind of software. So it's hard for a developer to make something and validate if it works, if that has the expected outcome.
right.
And so I think the best approach is to get in touch with the visually impaired community and get the feedback from the actual users.
Yeah,
I think
let them
the
beta
feedback
test for
should
you.
be. Yeah, exactly. If you want to support that group of players, then you have to make them, involve them into the process. That's like a must do, I think.
So after your 15 months of developing Path of Adventure and putting it out on the Google Store and the App Store, the Apple App Store,
Uh-huh.
how did you measure success? What was it that was it just getting the game out there as the measure of success? Was it how many people reviewed it or downloaded it or
Yeah, so I didn't put a real specific goal or something. I just wanted to see. I didn't know what to expect. Okay, so my previous games they got like 100 downloads or whatever just from my own website.
Mhm,
So I knew that mobile was big, and so I had hopes that I would have like in the thousands downloads.
mhm.
So actually, it went over it by by a lot.
Okay, good.
And yeah, that's great. Yeah, so how do I measure it? Like, yeah, number of downloads, ratings, reviews. Yeah,
Did it
just
get
really.
global? did it get global downloads, or like people, can you see what countries people downloaded it from?
Yeah, you can see that from like the insights on the stores, and it's mostly English speaking countries, of course.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, yeah, globally, yeah, definitely, yeah.
That
And
must be, exciting to know that there's someone, wherever,
yeah,
the
it's
United
amazing.
States, yeah, or
It's
Australia.
amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That's mind blowing. I get these statistics, and yeah, they are incomprehensible. I told my friend like I don't know when, a couple of years back, told him about the number of downloads, and he said, you could fill a stadium with
Yeah.
that number of
Yeah.
people. And it's like, oh my God, yeah, that's true.
Yeah. It is when you frame that and think about it that way,
Yeah,
that is
exactly.
great.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so, you have Path of Adventure. It's been out a few years now. So, I mean, does it, you know, I imagine when it first came out, that's when you see the highest traffic, but I mean, you still see downloads happening on a monthly basis at a decent clip. Has it leveled off? Where are you in that process right now?
So it's funny that I published it on two different stores, so iOS and Android.
Hmm.
But you can see the difference there because Android very early on featured it in some way, like RPG of the day or something like that.
Okay, yeah,
So I got like thousands of downloads in a day, and it was like an enormous spike. And then like a week later, it just goes down with the same speed.
right.
I'm now riding that wave, sort of. So it's I think on Android it's like 200 downloads a day or something.
Oh, that's great.
It's still very good. It's
Yeah.
still very good, yeah. And iOS never really spiked, but it just slowly grew. Even when I really stopped actively developing it, it just continued to generate traffic. And yeah, so those are two completely different experiences. And I think in total numbers, Android was always way bigger than iOS, and now they are getting close to each other. So that's interesting to see.
Do you follow any like I'm aware of a few accessibility influencers who do walkthroughs and playthroughs of Path of Adventure. Do you follow any of those people?
I've been on YouTube and watched some videos of people playing the game. Yeah, I'm not sure if we're talking about the same person, of course, but I'm aware that there are a couple of videos. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the one I know, because he's done a few different runs of it, because as we mentioned earlier, there's like different characters that you can start with. This
Uh-huh.
guy named Michael Gray from New Death Gaming. I've
Yeah,
seen,
yeah, that sounds familiar. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
he's done
I
quite a few
really
different
enjoyed
areas.
watching that. Yeah, it's amazing to see people playing your own game. That's like yeah,
Do you,
and getting excited about it as well because he is very excited.
yeah, 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 he's got a good personality. Um, do do you find that, oh, I never thought of playing it that way, or making a
Definitely.
decision like that? Do you
Yeah,
learn a lot of
definitely.
how differently people play the game than maybe what you
Yeah,
thought they would?
yeah. So on the audio games forum, there were. I mean, I got a lot of feedback from about the accessibility part, but people also played the game like very fanatically. Like they spent hours and hours playing the game, and they knew almost everything about it. So one player started to write like a wiki about the game,
Hmm.
and he even got like random numbers. He got them quite okay, like
Oh, yeah, pretty close to what
translation.
the
Yeah.
drops were. Yeah, wow.
So that was amazing, and he also had developed some tactics that I was like, oh yeah, oh I never thought about that, but nice find. And
Yeah.
yeah, that's I think that's the magic of gaming. You never know how a player will use whatever you make. That's really cool, I think.
You know, in 100 gameplays, right? Someone who isn't making silly decisions. I mean, do you expect 10 out of the 100 people to make it to the end boss? Or is it 20 out of 100? Like,
Mm.
is there kind of a frequency? Maybe not
It's
even
hard.
beat the game,
Yeah,
but at least get to the end.
it's very hard to balance the difficulty, right? Because you play the game so many times yourself, So the easy setting, the first character, I cannot understand that people fail at that level because it seems so obvious to me on what you have to do and make it to the end.
All right. Well, you're making me feel bad about myself a little bit.
Sorry, but yeah, I understand that if you're new to the game or if you don't know all the inside information,
I always
it's a
feel like I
way.
get some bad luck. I'm like, oh, I'm going to go check out the
Yeah,
cave. And, last time I got something great, and then the next three times I get
yeah.
destroyed in the cave.
Uh-huh, uh-huh. So yeah, it's hard to put a number on that. It's yeah, it's like a feeling, and yeah, like I'm saying, when you play the game yourself, you lose that feeling. It's hard to imagine like how is this game when it's the first time you play it. It's
Right.
very hard to yeah to balance that.
So, do you have a passive adventure two, that you have in mind to do, or some other game that you're considering putting out there?
Well, I'm thinking about stuff, but yeah, after those 15 months, I got another job, and I'm still at that and enjoying it as well. So I don't have that much time anymore,
Hmm.
and also, well, my family grew. So
Congratulations.
thank you, thank you. And we moved to another house, which needs a lot of renovation as well. So there is just very little time. But I'm thinking about some new stuff. I'm thinking about a new Path of Adventure, like a sequel, but more of an open world-ish game with some more depth and some more freedom as well. So I'm at the stage where I'm in is just basically thinking, like under the shower or making notes or
Mhm.
that kind of stuff. So it's really early on, and yeah, I don't know when I'm gonna get started working on that, but it's
Well,
probably
that's
gonna be
probably years away by the time you get
so. I
started
think
and find the time to actually put into it as
so.
a evening and weekend project.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. So I wouldn't wait for it, but I think there's something coming. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, again, thank you, so much for creating Path of Adventure. It's a fun, roguelike game. It's very accessible for those who are blind or visually impaired. As I mentioned, there are quite a few different YouTubers who do walkthroughs. So if you're looking to see what the game's like and get some strategies, I'll throw a shout out to Michael Gray from New Death Gaming. He does a great series on a couple different character types. And again, Jordan, if you have any updates to the game or you're coming out with a new game, please, reach out. We'd love to promote it and
I'll
share it with the
definitely.
community. And again, thanks for, taking the time, listening to those who reached out to you about improving the accessibility and making this game a game that the blind or visually impaired can enjoy.
Oh, you're most welcome, Aaron, and thank you a lot for the interview and spending your time on playing the game and getting it out there. So yeah, thank you a lot.
All right. Thank you, Jordan.